محمد وآله وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى وما خلق الذكر والأنثى إن سعيكم لشتى فأما من أعطى واتقى وصدق بالحسنى فسينسره لليسرى وأما من بخل واستغنى وما يغني عنه ماله إذا تردى إن علينا للهدى وإن لنا للآخرة والأولى فأنذرتكم نارا تلظى لا يصلاها إلا الأشقى الذي كذب وتولى وسيجنبها الأتقى الذي يؤتي ماله يتزكى وما لأحد عنده من نعمة تجزى إلا ابتغاء وجه ربه الأعلى ولسوف يرضى صدق الله العلي العظيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, Merciful. By the night when it envelops, by the day when it brightens, by Him who created the male and the female, your endeavors are indeed diverse. As for him who gives and is God-wary and confirms his best promise, we will surely ease him towards facility. But as for him who is stingy and self-complacent and denies the best promise, we will surely ease him towards hardship. His wealth will not avail him when he perishes. Indeed, guidance rests with us, and to us belongs the world and the hereafter. So I warn you of a blazing fire, which none shall enter except the most wretched of persons. He who impugns God's prophets and turns his back, the God-wary person will be spared of that. He who gives his wealth to purify himself and does not expect any reward from anyone, but seeks only the pleasure of their Lord, the most exalted, and surely soon they will be well pleased. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Brothers and sisters, just a reminder, please any snacks that you had outside, please finish those outside before entering the hall. Please keep your mask on outside during the program. And also to remind you that we will be having a program tonight, starting with Maghrib Namaz. It will be in the same hall, inshallah. So we ask you to join us then as well. And with that, please help me invite our speakers. Sheikh Mahdi Rastani, we realize the salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ومن يعش عن ذكر الرحمن نقيض له شيطانا فهو له قرين وإنهم ليصدونهم عن السبيل ويحسبون أنهم مهتدون حتى إذا جاءنا قال يا ليت بيني وبينك بعد المشرقين فبئس القرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. For the hastening and the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. My condolences on this day of the Arbaeen of our beloved third Imam. And the topic that we will be discussing today, inshallah, is a topic that directly correlates with the message of Imam al-Hussein. And that is a topic that I have given the title of spiritual freedom to. This idea of spiritual freedom is a terminology or a term that we use and hear very often. But in reality, if you were to go up to the average Muslim or the average Shia and ask them what this spiritual freedom really means, and how do you exactly define it, and how can you attain it in your day-to-day life, the average person will struggle to be able to give you a clear answer in this regard. It's one of those terms, sounds nice, we use it all the time, many times we throw it around, but in reality we don't know exactly what it's referring to. And the importance of it comes out of the fact that in many of the conversations that Imam al-Hussein is having, when he's going from Medina to Mecca, and from Mecca on these different stations, maybe 15 different stations that he is stopping at between Mecca and where he finally ends up in Karbala, he's constantly speaking of this idea of freedom or spiritual freedom. It comes up over and over again in his conversations. These conversations that the Imam is having, some of them are just normal conversations he's having. Some of the sentences are just a normal sentence that's being mentioned in a conversation. Sometimes he mentions a sentence that kind of defines why he's starting this trip and this journey to begin with. Not everything that the Imam is saying is the same when he converses with those around him. And sometimes this concept of spiritual freedom, you will find it being a reoccurring theme in what the Imam says. In two scenarios at least, two situations, you find the Imam brings up the idea of spiritual freedom. One of those is that line that we heard of from the Imam on the 10th of Muharram. They say on the 10th of Muharram there was one point where the Imam finally made his way towards Furat. And he kneeled down in Furat to take water from Furat. And at this time, the army of the enemy called out to him and said, Hussein, what are you doing sitting and taking water while the tents are being attacked? And the narration says he quickly got up and he said the following lines. He said, Wayhakum ya shi'ata ala Abi Sufyan, woe to you, how dare you, in lam yakun lakum deen, if you have no faith, if you have no religion, فَكُونُوا أَحْرَارًا فِي دُنْيَاكُمْ. So be free when it comes to your dunya. Be free human beings, yes? Have this spiritual freedom. And in an even more clear manner, you find this idea of spiritual freedom is brought up by the Imam in that famous line that many of us might have on our shirts or maybe our hoodies or whatever the case might be. And that is that famous line of hayhata minna ad-dhilla. This is a short phrase that the Imam has mentioned. In reality, there is a context to what he was saying. And that context was this. He used to call out to people and he used to say, Ala wa inna ad-da'i ibn ad-da'i. All of you should know that Yazid has placed us between two options. Bayna sillati wa dhilla. He has placed us between dhilla, humiliation, and silla. Silla means when you take the sword out of its cover. He's placed us between these two options. Either we go to war with him or we accept humiliation from him. And then he said this famous line, وَهَيْهَاتَ minna الذِّلَّةِ. And well, humiliation is not going to be an option for us because we are free human beings. We carry with ourselves this spiritual freedom. So this is a theme that comes up over and over again in the words of the Imam. But in reality, what is the spiritual freedom and how can you attain it? This is something that we want to discuss tonight, inshallah. And we'll do that today, rather, by posing the following questions. Number one, what is spiritual freedom? And when you talk about spiritual freedom, what is it that you are being freed from? Whenever you talk about freedom, that means there is something out there that's trying to captivate you. Something out there that's trying to get you. And that you're trying to run away from or stay away from. You're trying to be free from that thing. When they say spiritually free, what is it that you are trying to move away from? What is it that's trying to captivate you and you're trying to keep your freedom from that thing? Number one. Number two, what are the different stages and levels to developing spiritual freedom? And the different stages of losing your spiritual freedom. Number three, what examples do we have from the history of Karbala of those who initially may have not even wanted to kill the son of Fatima, but because they had lost their spiritual freedom, they ended up being and playing the biggest role in killing the son of Fatima. And number four, what examples do we have from the life of our ulama of those who maintain their spiritual freedom, and because of that, in the most difficult situations, they were able to make the best decisions. With that, inshallah, we'll delve into these four questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Normally, when we talk about this concept of freedom, and of course this is a term that we use and we hear very often, especially living in this part of the world, you say you're living in the free world now, yes? Sometimes you'll hear they say, the President of the United States is the leader of the free world. This idea of freedom comes up quite often, yes? If you were to ask the average person, what does it mean that you're free? What does it mean that you have freedom? This is normally how he would define what freedom is. He says, listen, I get to decide how I'm going to live my life. Whatever food I decide to have, whatever dress code I decide to observe, yes? Wherever I decide to come or go, nobody can stop me from doing what I want to do. Whatever I desire to do, I do it. This is a free individual. Yes, he has full freedom. You live in a free society, right? What does that mean? That means you get to decide and do whatever you like to do. You can practice whatever religion, you can eat whatever food, you can observe whatever dress code, or so they say, but that's the promise at least. And so based on this, freedom is based on what? It's based on your wants and your desires. Whatever you want, you're able to do it. Your desires and your wants and your wishes are the source of your freedom. Because you follow them, you do as you wish, you do as you like, and people point to you, say, this is a free person. It's a free human being. Yes? Please follow with me because it's about to take a turn. Our discussion is about to take a turn. This is normally how you discuss freedom. When it comes to spiritual freedom, then things change 180 degrees. And here's how. When you talk about spiritual freedom, these same wishes and desires and I want to do this, I want to do that, I like to do this, I like to do that. Islam teaches us that your spiritual freedom can be taken away because of these desires. Meaning that these desires can become the source of your captivity. They can captivate you to a point where even at times when you know something is wrong and you don't want to do it, it's almost as if your hands are tied and you kind of have to do it. It's like almost not even your hands anymore. See, how so? I thought these wishes and desires are the source of my freedom. I do as I wish, I do as I like. Yes, that's your normal freedom. When it comes to spiritual freedom, these same desires can become the source of your captivity. How? These desires that you and I have, if you continue to fulfill them without any limitations, they go from being a desire and they turn into a habit. They become a habit. If you continue down that road a little bit more, what happens? This habit starts to turn into what I am going to refer to as an addiction. It becomes so compelling, you can't even live life without not doing it. It's like part of your lifestyle now. Even if you don't want to do it sometimes, you kind of feel like you have to. I'll give you an example. It's probably not a good example because I drink coffee quite a bit myself. Initially when you have coffee, it's just like, it's chill, it's cool, you're having coffee, it's not a big deal. And you feel better, maybe you feel energized, maybe for a couple hours or whatever the case might be. And this slowly turns into a habit. So now every morning you wake up, you have your coffee. And then you continue without limitations. And this habit now starts to turn into what I'm using the word for, an addiction. An addiction, of course, has its own connotation. Usually when we use the word addiction, we're talking about a particular substance and so on and so forth. No, I just mean a habit that's so compelling that now if you don't do it, it's almost as if you can't function anymore. You guys seen the shirts, the mugs? It says, hey, don't talk to me if I haven't had my coffee. The WhatsApp statuses, don't message me if I don't. Now it's turned into this compelling habit that if you don't have it, it's like you can't even function during your day. What happened? It was a simple desire. You continue to fulfill it without any limitations. It turned into a habit, and then this habit started to turn into an addiction. And your desire now became the source of your captivity. Because now even if you don't want to have it, it's almost as if you have to have it. Islam says when it comes to your spiritual freedom, every one of your desires can do the same thing to you. The same idea of every one of your desires turning into an addiction can happen with every single one of your desires. And the problem is the society that we live in does not refer to this process as an addiction. Because usually when we use the word addiction, we're talking about a particular substance. Yes? But Islam says no, any desire can turn into an addiction. Any desire can now tie you down. It can hold you down. We live in a society, if someone has an addiction to gaining wealth, and he's willing to gain this wealth at any cost, he's willing to do anything to get his hands on this extra customer, this extra product, bringing this, better numbers into the bottom line of the company, whichever way you want to look at it, yes? He's willing to do anything. Islam says this person is addicted. He's ill. He has problems. But we look at it in the society that we live in, we say, no. MashaAllah, he's a successful businessman. He's doing very well. Islam doesn't have a problem with gaining wealth, but this person is willing to do anything. If there's a person who's willing to do anything to draw fame towards himself or herself, he's willing to say anything, willing to share any secrets from the lives of others, willing to post anything on social media just so that others pay attention to this person. Islam looks at this person and says this person is addicted. Their desires are getting the best of them. He's lost his spiritual freedom. He's willing to do anything. But we look at this person, we say, no, this person's a popular person. Look, they're doing very well. This is how we do things, yes? In Islam, if it's a person who cannot control his physical desires, Islam says this person's addicted, he has issues. In this society, we say, no, he's a very powerful person. Look, he can engage in multiple relationships. And I don't want to go into detail. Oh, look, that's the life he's living. Islam says this guy's addicted. He's got problems. The problem is we don't even have the vocabulary in the English language. Because the moment I use the word addiction, our mind goes where? Mind goes to the substance. Islam says every desire of yours can turn into an addiction for you. It just depends. And so what it comes down to is this. Islam says, and this might seem like a contradiction to many of us, but this is the one-liner of today's talk. If you want to live a free life, a spiritually free life, you have to limit yourself. So, Shaykh, we're talking about freedom. What do you mean limit yourself? If you want to be a free person, you have to limit yourself. That's how it works. Because if you don't limit yourself and you live a life without any restrictions, guess what will limit you? Your desires. You know, a lot of times growing up, you might be like, 10, 12, 15, 20, or even an adult. You look at the lives of others who don't practice the religion. Yes, either they're Muslim and they don't practice, or they're not even Muslim. Yes? And you say, man, this life is so much easier. Like, they don't have to pray 5 times a day. There's no fajr, I don't know. Like, they can eat whatever they want to eat. They can do whatever they want to do. And many of us are drawn to that lifestyle. You're like, I want to live a free life. I don't want to have any restrictions. This is what Islam is trying to tell you. If you want to live a life without any restrictions, be my guest. But let me tell you what's going to happen. Your desires will become your restrictions. Your desires, because you're fulfilling them so often, will then start to turn into addictions. And even when you don't want to act upon them, you will be forced almost as if to act upon them. And I've dealt with this situation many times, a person who engages in a relationship outside of the household, yes, outside of this marriage. Is it because this person hates his family? No, not necessarily. But he's lost his spiritual freedom to a point where he's addicted. So even if he doesn't even want to deep down, it's almost as if his hands are tied. He has to do it. This person who opens her mouth, yes, and if I use feminine or masculine pronouns, this can go either way, right? I don't want anyone coming after like say, Shaykh, you said this about the brothers, you said this about the sisters. Is neutral gender, whatever, This person can open their mouth and say things in the most critical moments to ruin the whole family. Is it because they hate the people in the family? No. Sometimes it's simply because they're so addicted, they can't even stop themselves. It's like their desires have gotten the best of them to an extent where many times, even if they don't want to do something, it feels like they have to do it. And you can add other examples to this as well. And this is what happens that the human being loses his spiritual freedom. So this is the first level of losing your spiritual freedom, where you don't even want to do something, but because you have this addiction, you end up doing it anyway. You end up committing the sin, even though deep down you know it's wrong for you to commit the sin. Then some people, they will continue on this path without repenting. They'll continue on this path, they'll continue to sin without turning back. Then they graduate to level number 2. And this is the only area where graduation is not a good thing. Because you're going to the worst level. You're going to an even worse level, yes? Level number 2, what's level number 2? Not only does this guy do haram and does he commit sins, now shaitan comes and gives him tips. He's like, you're going to get under her skin anyways. But this is what you should say. You're going to break his heart anyways, but this is how you should do it. Then he won't even be able to recover from what you're about to say. You're going to do this. This is how you can do it. It'll bring you even more pleasure. And the Quran speaks of this. He says there are those who continuously disobey God until a point comes where shaitan now comes and does wahy to them. He does revelation to them. What is this revelation? It's not Quran or anything. No, he comes to them and says, listen, you're going to do this. This is what you should say. This is what you should do. He's become pals with shaitan. Like shaitan is his buddy. The Quran says when this person continues on this path, this is where he's headed. It says, وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ. The shayateen come, they speak privately with their awliya, with their close friends. لِيُجَادِلُوكُمْ. And then those guys come to you, the Muslimin, they argue with you, and you think these brilliant ideas that this guy is speaking of is his own ideas. In reality, it was shaitan's ideas, feeding his thoughts, because he's buddies with this guy now. And then you continue down this path, comes a third level. The third level is what? This third level is the one that there are shaitans living with him every day. Living with him every day. He goes to sleep, the shaitan is there with him. He wakes up, the shaitan is there with him. He eats food, the shaitan is there with him. And these are those verses that I recited from Surah Fussilat. The Quran says, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا. The one who turns away from the message of Allah, we will appoint for him a shaitan. فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. He becomes his qareen. Qareen means the one you're acquainted with. وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ. And he's constantly whispering in his ears. And this guy thinks he's doing really well in life. وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا مُهْتَدُونَ. He thinks he's doing well. So what happens? He shows up on the day of judgment, and then he sees the shaitan who's been spending time with him day and night. حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَنَا. When he comes to us on the day of judgment, and he sees what ugly of a creature was spending time with him all the time. He says, يَا لَيْتَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ بُعْدَ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ. I wish I had never even spent any time with you. Normally when we talk about a jinn living with you, we get all these scary thoughts, yes? This paranormal activity. You come in the house and then the slippers move this way, for example. This is the stuff we're usually scared of, right? Sheikh, I came and then the curtain moved. Well, jinn is a real thing and Quran talks about it and so on and so forth. I'm not denying the idea of jinn, yes? But the Quran, by the way, has a whole surah about jinn. He never talks about paranormal activity in this whole surah. Maybe if there was more paranormal activity in Surah Jinn, we would recite more Quran. This is interesting. Got to recite this surah, right? So when the Quran says, oh, be careful of the jinn, is he talking about, the curtain moving and someone whispering something? It's not talking about that. So what's the major danger that he talks about? He says, this shaitan is with you. He's telling you to do wrong things. And he tells you to do wrong things and you don't even realize that shaitan is with you. You don't get goosebumps. You don't feel like, oh my God, something's happening around me. You're not alone. No, you're not alone many times. You might be sitting in a crowd. He whispers in your ears, after this, just go and do your haram. It's no problem. This is the real threat, the real danger. He says he will do waswasa to you. And he does it in such a way we don't even realize it. It's like, yeah, I have this thought to commit this sin. But it's my thought. No, it's not necessarily your thoughts. It might be someone else whispering in your ears. It says these guys show up on that day and they see the shaitan that they were living with throughout their whole life. This is different from the main shaitan. This is different from Iblis. Hadith says there are shayateen appointed to every human being that's born. Because the same way we're born and we recreate and procreate and so on and so forth, the narrations tell us that shaitan also and the jinn also do this. They have their own families and they have their own groups and there's many of them. Iblis is, the boss. There's many of them. He appoints and says, you're in charge of this guy, you're in charge of this guy. These are the levels of losing your spiritual freedom. And the best example for this is none but an individual by the name of Umar ibn Sa'd in Karbala. Umar ibn Sa'd should be a name that should ring a bell for many of us, yes? He was the commander on the other side. In many ways, you can say the one who did Karbala or got Karbala done or made Karbala happen, in many ways are Umar ibn Sa'd. Because initially when Imam al-Hussein was coming to Karbala, it was not the army of Umar ibn Sa'd he was dealing with, it was the army of Hurr. And this army of Hurr was a smaller army. It wasn't in the thousands, like this huge army. It wasn't that. It was a smaller army. That's why initially when the Imam encountered the army of Hurr, some of the companions of the Imam asked the Imam, they said, let us engage in war with this army before the bigger army comes. And Imam Hussein said, no, I have been taught to never begin the battle. Therefore, I can't engage in battle when they are not attacking us, because all Hurr was supposed to do was what? Isolate the Imam and push him into a corner and take him to a land that is barren, the letter said. When you receive my letter, take Hussein and have him settle down in a land where there is no water. It's the only thing Hurr was supposed to do. He was not supposed to engage in battle. And then what happened? Then the army of Umar ibn Sa'd came. So who was Umar ibn Sa'd? This guy who became the commander on the 10th of Muharram. It's funny, but this guy, he didn't even start out wanting to kill the son of Fatima. He started out, he wanted to be the governor of the city of Ray, famous city in Persia at that time. He wanted to be the governor of Ray. I just want to be an important person. People come, they give me money, they give me their taxes, like I have authority, it feels good, so on and so forth. That's all he wanted. And he was actually leaving Kufa to go to Ray. He wasn't even headed towards Karbala. What happened? Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad said, Umar ibn Sa'd, if you want to have the governance of the city of Ray, you have to go and get rid of Hussein. You have to take your army and get rid of him. And history tells us that initially he didn't even want to do this. He said, no, the son of Fatima, me? Well, I don't want to kill the son of Fatima. I just want to be in charge over there. He had this strong addiction to becoming this governor. This addiction to authority. That was his problem. And Ubaydullah knew this, so every time he said no, Ubaydullah would dangle this governance of Ray in front of his eyes, and he would give in. It's like, I can't do it, I really want this so badly. So what happens? He came to Karbala with the bigger army. Okay, when did the bigger army arrive in Karbala? Maybe 2nd, 3rd of Muharram. And of course there were others who arrived later as well. But you look from 2nd, 3rd of Muharram until when the Imam was actually martyred, 10th of Muharram. What was happening during this time? Yes, the caravan was there, and they say from the 7th, now the water was almost cut off, like very little water in the tents, and the women and the children were thirsty, and so on and so on. But 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, what was happening? One of the things that was happening was that Umar ibn Sa'd, in my words, he couldn't pull the trigger. He couldn't just get himself to do this. And so he was stalling. And he was trying to buy time. He said, well, yeah, maybe we can come up with a deal with Hussein and Yazid, and maybe, they can get on the same side, and maybe we don't have to worry about killing Imam al-Hussein. That's what Umar ibn Sa'd was doing this whole time. Until he got letters from Ubaydullah, closer to the 10th of Muharram, and the letter said, Umar ibn Sa'd, if you're not going to get this job done, then walk aside and move away, and let Shim take care of this. Why are you stalling for so long? And Umar ibn Sa'd was like, I can't get myself to do this. Because he never wanted to kill the son of Fatima. But you see, he had an addiction that was so strong, it's almost as if his hands were tied. His hands were not tied. He had free will, yes? But when you lose your spiritual freedom, when it comes to critical moments, now you make terrible decisions. And what happened? This person who initially didn't even want to have anything to do with this situation, he became the one who took out the first arrow on the 10th of Muharram. And he shot this arrow towards the tents of Hussein. And he said, everyone bear witness to Amirul Mu'mineen. I was the one who started all of this. Because he wanted his reward. This is what happens. And he is the one who ordered the trampling of the bodies. And he is the one who ordered the tents being burnt on the 10th of Muharram. How far did he go because of this addiction that he had? This is an example of a person who's lost his spiritual freedom. And now he's doing the most horrific things, even though deep down he knows it's horrific, he still ends up doing all of them. Recite a salawat, please. This is a person who loses his spiritual freedom. Then on the flip side, there are those who maintain and develop their spiritual freedom. What does that look like? There are those who limit their desires, and because of that, in critical moments, they're able to make the right decision, even though it kind of goes against their desires. This is the first level. He knows that he should not be yelling at his wife or his husband, at his children or his parents. And even though deep down it's like boiling up inside of him and he wants to say something, but he doesn't do it because he knows it's wrong. This is a person who still has his spiritual freedom. Then Shahid Mutahari says this person, if he continues on this path, he graduates to level 2 of his spiritual freedom. This first level, of course, is the most difficult, by the way. It's like most of us would be in this first level, yes? He says he graduates to level number 2. What's level number 2? Now, not only can he control his actions, he can control his thoughts as well. If he doesn't want his thoughts to go in a certain direction, he can control his thoughts as well. This is level number 2. Then from there, he graduates to level number 3. What's level number 3? He says that then now, not only can he control his actions and his thoughts, he can now control natural phenomena around him as well. He has so much freedom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him the ability to control and intervene in natural events that take place around him. And this is something that we know for a fact Ahlul Bayt had. You say Ahlul Bayt did this miracle or that miracle. How did they do this miracle? Because they had the ability to intervene in the natural phenomena that was taking place around them. Yes? And we have many stories that some scholars also had this ability. Which scholars and to what extent and which story, it's a separate discussion. But there's so many stories, you almost can't deny it at this point. Shaykh Tari says this is possible for the human being. And if the human being has this type of spiritual freedom, when it comes to critical moments in his life, he can make the right decision. And I want to share a story with you of an individual who developed his spiritual freedom, that at one point where he had to make the right decision, he made the best of decisions. There's a scholar, famous scholar, he was a marja in Najaf, known as Ayatullah Kuh Kamari, famous marja. And when you're a marja in Najaf, I just want to put this into perspective because many of us don't really understand and grasp the greatness and the significance of this. When you're a marja in Najaf, when you say something or do something, people give their lives. People will give their wealth, their money, their lives at times, And we saw this with Hash al-Shabi and Ayatul Sistani. This is a good example of this, yes? And it's not the first example. In history, we've had other examples of this as well. So when you're a marja in Najaf, you're like a really big deal. Like a really big deal. I know normally we live in this society, so we might associate being a really big deal with like a celebrity. No, this is far beyond that. It's far. People are willing to give their lives for you. Okay, Ayatollah Kuh Kamari is a marja in the city of Najaf. He has his class in the masjid. He comes and teaches his class in the masjid. It says one day he came to teach his class, and he saw in the corner of the masjid, there's this guy sitting there. He doesn't know who he is. The sheikh is sitting there. And his clothing is a very modest clothing. He's got holes in it and patches on his clothing and, almost a person who can't even sort of pay his bills and that type of clothing, really struggling financially. But he's teaching a class. And Ayatollah Kuh Kamari doesn't even know who this guy is. Sneak peek. This is the famous Sheikh Al-Ansari. Just remember that name, Sheikh Ansari. Who nowadays, if you study in the Hawza, Qom, Najaf, anywhere, you have to study the works of Sheikh Ansari. It's very high level. Look, he doesn't know who this guy is. So he goes home that day. The next day he comes to the masjid, he comes early. and the students aren't there. So he says, well, the Shaykh is sitting there and teaching again. Just let me go and sit in his class. Let me see what's going on over there. So he goes and he sits in the class of Shaykh Ansari. And while he's sitting in the class of Shaykh Ansari, all of a sudden he says, oh, this guy's talking about some really advanced stuff. He's talking about some really deep concepts. These are concepts that even I'm not familiar with. He's thinking to himself. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're listening to someone and they say something and then initially like, no, there's no way that's true. And then when they make a case for it, and they bring their proof to the table, then you're like, wow, that's exactly true. Going through Hawza, I had this experience many times. Many times. Our teacher would say something, first couple years of Hawza, the teacher says something, you're like, that's no way that's true. Then as you advance in your studies, you're like, you know what? There's no way anything else could be true. Only this is true. It's your knowledge grows, yes? I remember our teacher one time in the philosophy class, he said, there's this concept in Islamic philosophy that knowledge and the one who gains that knowledge are united with one another. They're one being. I was like, come on. There's no way that's true. It doesn't even make sense. Then he went through the proof of it, and it turns out that's the only thing that makes sense. The opposite of it doesn't make any sense at all. He's sitting there in the class of Shaykh Ansari, and Shaykh Ansari is like, this is this, and this is that. And he's like, wow, I didn't even know this stuff. So what happened? This is a person who has spiritual freedom. He's been working on his spiritual freedom. The next day his students came and they prepared for class. And this great marja then said, I'm not teaching you guys anymore. They said, you're a great marja, you have to teach. You have class all the time. He said, yes, I'm a marja and everything, but the Shaykh Ansari has come into town. He knows more than me. He's more knowledgeable than me. I'm going to go sit in his class and you all are going to come with me. And Shaykh Ansari slowly got to be known in the city of Najaf. And nowadays, nobody studies the works of Ayatollah Kuh Kamarei. Everyone studies the works of who? Of Shaykh al-Ansari. But when you have spiritual freedom, you can make the right decision in the right moments. And here's the message that we want to take away today. Every single one of you and I will be in critical moments in your life where you have to make the right decision. Every single one of us. You don't have to be a marja for this to apply to you. No. There will be a moment your parent says something. There will be a moment your wife or your husband says something. There will be a moment your child says something. And if you've developed your spiritual freedom, in that moment you can make the right decision. Or you can end up breaking their hearts. You can end up ruining the family. You can end up, God forbid, being abusive. This is real things that we have in our communities, unfortunately. It's all about the type of spiritual freedom that you've developed. And the only way to develop spiritual freedom is to do your wajib and stay away from haram consistently. It's the only way to build it. And when I say wajib and haram, normally we think salat and no. Salat and fasting is part of it, and your good akhlaq is part of it, and being fair to other people is part of it, and all this, everything. Full religion, not just whatever I like to do. If you maintain this spiritual freedom, then when critical moments come in your life, you can make the right decision. Every single one of us at one point or another will be at a position of authority in one way or another. Whether it relates to your own family, whether it relates to your relatives, whether it relates to the community, whether it relates to the school, it doesn't matter. You're going to be tested with this. And if you have that spiritual freedom, in that moment you can make the right decision. And if you don't, in that moment, you and I are going to mess things up. And then we'll sit back with regrets. And you and I'll say, what? I don't hate these people, but it's almost as if my hands are tied. I can't even make the right decision. Because these addictions, these desires have become so compelling for me, I can't even make the right decision anymore. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we can develop our spiritual freedom to a point where in those moments we can make the right decisions. And this is exactly what Imam Hussein expects from us. If you and I go through this Muharram and Arbaeen, and you come out the other way being the same exact person that you and I were, you're not doing Muharram and Arbaeen the right way. You're doing it the wrong way. You're not benefiting from this Muharram and Arbaeen. No. Now you want to benefit from this Muharram. How do you do that? You got to build your spiritual freedom. You got to stay away from haram. You got to do it consistently. That's the way you go through Muharram and Arbaeen. How many times have people asked me, Shaykh, we do a lot of stuff in Muharram and Arbaeen, but it feels like nothing changes. Well, you're doing it wrong then. If you go through Muharram and Arbaeen and nothing changes, you're doing it wrong. Something's supposed to change. You're supposed to become a better person. You're supposed to take some of those habits. You're supposed to look at yourself and say, you know what, I have this flaw. I'm not doing this anymore. At least you have to make an intention, at least. Whether you're successful or not successful, maybe not. We'll have to see about that. Sometimes habits take multiple years to get rid of. But at least that should be your intention. And this is what Imam Hussein wants from us. With that, inshallah, I'll bring today's talk to an end. Let us take our hearts to the plains of Karbala, to the city of Sham, and remember the family of the Ahlul Bayt. The caravan of the Ahlul Bayt is now entered into the city of Sham. And these women and children have been paraded throughout the city of Sham. Imagine the pain, imagine the agony. Imagine the difficulty that these children and women are going through. Many of them have lost brothers, many of them have lost fathers and uncles. And instead of comforting their pain, instead of consoling their pain, now they're being paraded through the city of Sham. Some of the narrations say people were throwing stones at this family. Some of the narration says people were clapping, they were singing in the presence of this family. If you've ever seen someone who's lost a loved one, you know that their heart is extremely sensitive in those moments. Their heart is going through a lot of pain in those moments, let alone if you love and lose someone like Hussein, let alone if you lose someone like Ali al-Akbar, let alone if you lose someone like Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. These women and children have been through so much, and now they're going through this city of Sham. And they are brought into this palace of the Mal'un Yazid. And they say at one point Yazid ordered for someone to go up on the mimbar and to curse the family of the Ahlul Bayt, and to curse Imam Ali, and to curse Imam al-Hussein. And when he came down from the mimbar, the narration says Ali ibn al-Hussein, Imam Sajjad, he turned to Yazid, he said, give me permission to speak as well. Let me defend my family too. And Yazid did not allow this. He knew that this was going to be a problem. And the people insisted, they said, let Ali ibn al-Hussein speak as well. You gave your speaker a chance, let Ali ibn al-Hussein speak as well. And they continued to insist, and Yazid continued to deny this request until his own son said, he said, Father, this Ali ibn al-Hussein, he's just a young man. Let him talk. What do you think he can do with his just talking? Until Yazid turned to his son, he said, my son, you don't know this family. This is the family who's been granted knowledge and wisdom and eloquence. But he finally allowed this request. And Imam al-Sajjad went up on the mimbar and he started to introduce himself. He said, we are the Ahlul Bayt, and we are blessed with 7 individuals that no other than us is blessed with. He said, Muhammad al-Mustafa is from us, and Ali Amir al-Mu'mineen is from us, and Ja'far al-Tayyar is from us, and Hamza Sayyid al-Shuhada is from us, and Hassan and Hussein are from us, and the Mahdi is going to be from us. Which other family has any of these individuals amongst them? And he continued, he says, Ana ibn Makkah wa Mina. I'm the son of Mecca and Mina. I'm the son of the prophets. And he continued, he said, I'm the son of Zamzam. I'm the son of Safa. I'm the son of the one who brought you this message to begin with. And I am the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who fought alongside the prophets. And he continued and he continued, and people now, they see tears falling from their faces because now they realize who this family really is. And now they realize who Imam al-Sajjad really is. And the narration continues, and then it says at one point Imam al-Sajjad says, أنا ابن فاطمة الزهراء, I am the son of Fatimah al-Zahra. أنا ابن سيدة نساء العالمين, I am the son of the best of women who's ever lived. And the narration says everyone in this gathering was now crying. So much so that Yazid wanted to stop this. He called for the mu'adhin to come and give adhan. And the mu'adhin cut off the imam and he called out, he said, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And the imam said, Allahu Akbar, God is greater than everything. And he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I bear witness there's no God but Allah. And Imam al-Sajjad said, I bear witness to the same thing. And then he came to this one line. Imagine the pain in the hearts of Imam al-Sajjad. He came to this one line. He said, وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. And then Imam al-Sajjad stopped him. He said, Yazid, this Muhammad that he's speaking of, is he my grandfather or is he your grandfather? And if he's my grandfather, then why did you kill his children? Why did you massacre his children? Why did you captivate his women and children and bring them into the courtyard? These women and children, their hands are tied, they have ropes around their hands, and here you are, and your women and children, they are free standing in your courtyard. And the narration says everyone is crying in these moments. And you know who else introduced himself like Imam al-Sajjad is introducing himself? You know who else walked into the battlefield and said, Ana, this is who I am? This was none but Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Because when Qasim came into the battlefield, he said very similar things. He said, In tunkiruni, if you don't know who I am, فَأَنَا فَرْعُ al-Hasan, I'm the son of Hasan. But what happened to Qasim ibn al-Hasan on the 10th of Muharram? Imagine the pain of Imam al-Hussein. When many of these companions have gone to the battlefield already, many of them have been martyred already. Ali al-Akbar has been martyred already. Then they say at one point, Qasim ibn al-Hasan started to make his way towards the tent of Hussein. You know the heart of Hussein went through so much pain the moment he saw Qasim approaching this tent. Because he knows what Qasim is going to come to ask for. He knows Qasim is going to come to ask to go to the battlefield. But how can Hussein allow him to go? This is the son of Hassan. This is the yatim of Hassan. This is the amana of Hassan. How can he give him permission to go? The narration says he came into the tent of Hassan, and the moment Imam al-Hussein saw Qasim ibn al-Hasan and their eyes met, the narration says they started to cry and cry heavily. They embraced one another, and then the narration says they fainted. And then they came back to their senses, and Hussein continued to say no, and Qasim continued to ask for him to go to the battlefield, until one narration says at one point Qasim showed him this letter from Imam al-Hasan. And you can imagine the moment Hussein sees the handwriting of Imam al-Hasan, the tears start to flow from his eyes, and he says, Qasim, I don't want you to go, but if you have to go, you can go. And Qasim now starts to make his way towards the battlefield. But this young man is so young, they can barely find any armor for Qasim ibn al-Hasan. What went through the heart of Hussein as he was looking for armor for Qasim? My son Qasim, you have nothing. You have no armor. You're too young to go to the battlefield. But here's Qasim making his way towards the battlefield. The narration says as he entered into the battlefield, he called out, In tunkiruni fa'ana far'ul Hasan. If you don't know who I am, I'm the son of Hassan. I'm here to defend the grandson of the Prophet that you all want to take his life. He entered into the battlefield. He started to fight bravely. The narration says one of the enemies on the other side, he turned to his companions. He said, I'm going to put the pain of losing this child in the heart of his mother. I'm going to bring an end to the life of this child. The narrator says, I turned to him. I said, there's enough enemies around him. You don't need to go and take his life. He said, no, I want to be the one who does this. And as Qasim was fighting in this battlefield, then all of a sudden he was struck on the head. And he fell from this horse and he called out, he said, Ya Amma, my uncle, come. The narration says Hussein ran like never before. He rushed into the battlefield. The Maqtal says that there was dust up in the air. Nobody could see what was happening. The only thing that we could see when the dust settled was that Hussein was sitting by the body of Qasim. The narration says Qasim was in so much pain, he was pushing his feet into the sands of Karbala, and his uncle was sitting there beside him, and he said this one line to Qasim. He said, Qasim, it's so difficult for me that you called for my help and you asked for my help, but there's nothing I can do for you. Azza wallah ala ammik. It's so difficult for your uncle. When you call him and tad'u, fala yujibuk, but he can't even respond to you. He can't even do anything for you. What went through the hearts of Hussein in those final moments by the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan? All we know is that then the narration says Hussein picked up the body of Qasim and he started to drag him back. The narration says, I looked from far away. I saw Hussein is carrying the body of this young man and his feet are being dragged in the sands of Karbala all the way to the back of the tents. Imagine these women and children are witnessing these moments. Imagine they're all watching to see if Qasim ibn al-Hasan is going to come back, and the only thing they see is coming back is Hussein with the lifeless body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Imagine Hussein brings this body to the back of the tents. It must have been the case that at one point Zainab makes her way back to the back of the tents and sits by the body of Qasim. Qasim, you were the amana of Hassan. You were the trust of Hassan. But what could we do that these enemies wanted to take your life? Imagine as Zainab speaks to the body of Qasim in those final moments. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Let us take a moment to send our salams to our beloved Imam in the plains of Karbala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati halat bifinaik alayka minni jami'an salamullahi abada ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq, the opportunity to be amongst the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt, insha'Allah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who are sick and ill, all of those dealing with difficulty, with problems, all of those who have hajat and requests, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them their hajat and requests, insha'Allah. And finally, last but not least, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam bin Nabiyyi wa alih, rahimallahu man qara al-Fatihata ma'a as-salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
لبيك يا حسين
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 لبيك يا حسين لبيك يا حسين لبيك يا حسين
Starts going to Canada, all my lonely watching heart. Start going to Canada, all my watching lonely heart. Remember that Canada that still tears us all apart. Start going to Canada, all my lonely watching heart. Remember that caravan that still turns us all apart. We see the columns as the flags of your sand. Remember King Abbas, our tears falling like rain in this desert. Pay your respect. Chants of labbaik ya Hussein, we won't forget ya Allah, ya Allah. Labbaik ya Sayyidi, ya Habib Allah, ya Allah. Everyone. Ya from the grief and the sorrow, with our love and compassion, on the day of Arbaeen, we'll come to you with passion, from the grief and the sorrow, with our love and compassion, we answer you, Hussein, O Master of the free. Your day is now our soul. This day of Arbaeen, this day of Arbaeen, in this desert, pay your respect. Chants of labbaik ya Hussein, we won't forget in this desert. Pay your respect. Chants of labbaik ya Hussein, we won't forget ya Allah. Everyone, ya Allah. Labbaik ya Habib Allah, ya Allah, ya Allah. Labbaik ya Sayyidi, ya Habib Allah. Oh Lord, you carry the grief on yourself, oh Arbaeen, creating passion in us through all that Zaynab had seen. Oh Lord, you carry the grief on yourself, oh Arbaeen, creating passion in us through all that Zaynab had seen. Chanting your Aitana, your thoughts in heaven, trying to feel the pain Arbaeen were the first, now in their steps we follow. Zainab, dear Zainab, without Rashida, the revolution of Islam would have been gone. Zainab, dear Zainab, without what you had done, the revolution of Islam would have been gone. In this desert, your respect, chants of labbaika ya Hussein, we won't forget. Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah, labbaik ya Sayyidi, Ya Dhabih Allah, Ya Thar Allah. MashaAllah, everyone, Ya Thar Allah. Your voices. لبيك يا سيدي يا ذبيح Allah. The lions have come to you, their voices thundering roars. O Daesh, go run away, for their rage will devour. The lions have come to you, their voices thundering roars. O Daesh, go run away, for their rage will devour. Arbaeen has arrived, day of Hussein. Allah will help them fight against the Yazidin. Arbaeen has arrived, day of Hussein. Allah will help them fight against the Yazidin. Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah, labbaik ya Sayyidi, Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah, labbaik ya Sayyidi, Ya Habib Allah. Yemen is lying wounded, the scent of blood can be sensed. Al-Quds is God's holy hand that all evil stands against. Yemen is lying wounded, the scent of blood can be sensed. Al-Quds is God's holy hand that all evil stands against. From Aqsa to Ash-Sham, victories we can see. Waves of people in Bahrain show we are free. Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah, labbaik ya Sayyidi, Ya Dhabih Allah, Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah. MashaAllah. Ya Dhabih Allah. The martyrs have a light that destroys the darkness in hearts. They are our guiding models, and to them we tie our past. The martyrs have a light that destroys the darkness in hearts. They are our guiding models, and to them we tie our past. From Shahid Arif to legend of Mughniya, the lands of Pakistan, to plains of Syria. Ya Thar Allah, لبيك سيدي يا ذبيح يا ثار الله يا ثار الله يا ثار الله لبيك سيدي يا حبيب الله يا ابن الحسن where are you? This question in all our hearts, this separation from you begins to take us apart. Ya Ibn al-Hasan, where are you? This question in all our hearts, this separation from you begins to take us all apart. My master, O Mahdi, hope of Lady Zahra, the one to take revenge for the day of Ashura. My master, O Mahdi, hope of Lady Zahra, the one to take revenge for the day of Ashura. In this desert, pay your respect. Chants of Labbaika Ya Hussein, we won't forget in this desert. Pay your respect. Chants of Labbaika Ya Hussein, we won't forget Ya Thar Allah. Are you reciting? Ya Thar Allah, Labbaik Ya Sayyidi, Ya Dhabih Ya Thar Allah, Ya Thar Allah, Labbaik Ya Sayyidi, Ya Habib Allah. Every day and night we remember Hussein. Every day and night we remember Hussein. We cry for Hussein and we call Ya Hussein. We cry for Hussein and we call Ya Hussein. Our goal is to spread the message of Hussein. Our goal is to spread the message of Hussein. To live and to die like our master Hussein. To live and to die like my master Hussein. And every beat of my heart calls the name of Hussein. Every beat of my heart calls the name of Hussein. And written on my heart is the name of Hussein. And written in my heart is the name of Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, MashaAllah. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. How much I've been dreaming to see Karbala. How much I've been dreaming to see Karbala. My eyes are begging me to see Karbala. My feet, they keep walking towards Karbala. When finally I see the dome of Hussein, everyone. When finally I see the dome of Hussein. One more time. When finally I see the dome of Hussein, I enter heaven and I cry, Ya Hussein. I enter heaven and I cry, Ya Hussein. You're the drew you upon every eye Karbala. Your Lord drew you upon every eye, Karbala. Your name flows with every tear and cry, Karbala. Your name flows with every tear and cry, Karbala. Karbala, 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 Karbala. Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati allamat bifiraik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم all together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين
وعلى جميع الشهداء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على